Let's study 9th Standard ICSE English Literature Story 6, An Angel in Disguise by T.S. Arthur. When you hear the word angel, what comes to your mind? A super being with wings, a halo on top. But we may have angels among us, human beings. They may have no superpowers, but they are so kind and helpful that they can completely change our lives, and hence we can call them an angel in disguise. That is, not in the original form, dressed up as somebody else, or in another form which we couldn't recognize at first. Similarly, there was an angel who came in the life of Maggie. Maggie was a very young girl. She had an elder brother, John, who was 12 years old, and Kate, who was around 10 to 11 years old, her sister, Kate. And the three kids had a mom, a single parent, and she was vicious. She was an alcoholic. She had many vices, bad habits. She had a very bad temper. The whole village hated her. And all these things took a toll on her health, and one day she just collapsed and died on the threshold of her house, at the door of her house, because of alcoholism and other health related issues. Which was a very tragic event, because she's dead, but what about the kids? Who would take care of them? That was a question in the minds of people, the village people, the neighbors. The mother's body was just packed off in a coffin, and it was taken away to be buried in a pauper's grave. Nobody followed that coffin on that wagon. She was dead, but now the villagers were discussing how to take care of these kids. So the farmer Jones decided to take the stout lad John, and he could train him and use him in his fields, and he can take care of him. Mrs. Ellis decided to take Kate under her wings, and she said that she was looking for a maid, but Kate was too young to be a maid. She'll have to train her for many years before she was of any use to her. So she wanted to just suggest to people that she was doing a favor by taking this mischievous girl, Kate. But ultimately, people are self-centered. They would only look at their long-term advantage. And that is why nobody decided to take Maggie under their wings, because Maggie, a couple of years ago, had fallen from a window and injured her spine. She was paralyzed. She was bedridden. She couldn't do any work. In fact, somebody had to always help her out, to feed her, to bathe her, and even her medications had to be taken care of. Somebody suggested that she should be sent to a poor house, a place for poor people, orphans, the destitutes. It's a horrible place, but there might be no option for such people. But the other people thought that she needs medical attention, so will she get it in the poor house? So it was inconclusive about what to do, and people took care of her on that day. They changed her clothes, made her wear clean clothes, changed the bed sheets, gave her some food. But this was short-term care. Then they just left the house. She was very scared of being left alone, because she can't even go and fetch water for herself. She would die if she left alone for many days. So just when the last lady was leaving, the blacksmith's wife, Mr. Thompson, who was a wheelwright, saw her. He used to fix wheels of wagons and other wooden things. He was like a mechanic. And he expressed that it is not fair to just leave her alone. So the blacksmith's wife told him that, why don't you take her to the poor house? So he decided that he will do that. Then he entered the house, and it was hardly a house, it was a hut. It was not even a proper shelter for the girl. So when he entered that place, Maggie cried out for help and said that, please don't leave me alone. Looking at those pitiful glances of Maggie, it melted Mr. Thompson's heart, and he promised her that he won't leave her alone. He wrapped her in the bedclothes and lifted her. He had very strong arms, but his heart was soft. And soon he could feel an emotional bond being created with this girl. You see, Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson were childless. After so many years of marriage, they didn't have any children, which had left a vacuum in their life. Mr. Thompson particularly loved children. He was a wheelwright, and he would fix the wheels of the children's wagons and other toys, wooden toys, for free. Mrs. Thompson, on the other hand, had become very bitter and self-centered, because being without a child, her motherly feelings, her maternal instincts had withered away. And so they were not a happy couple. But Mr. Thompson saw a silver lining in this dark cloud. He took Maggie to his house first of all. Now, Mrs. Thompson saw Mr. Thompson with Maggie, and she rushed out of the house at the gates and asked him, "Why have you brought her here?" Mr. Thompson just told her to speak politely in front of her. She had just lost her mother, not to scare her. And he understood the temperament of his wife. He knew how to tackle it. Lucky guy. So he told her firmly that he would like to keep her in his house overnight, and she should not be so cruel. He also played the religious card, stating that even in the Bible, Jesus Christ has said that children are blessed and they should be taken care of. They should not be denied anything. So looking at this determination from Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson stepped back and inquired that what happened. He said that he has planned to take her to the poorhouse, but first he needs to take permission of the guardians. The village had some guardians, the elderly people. So only after taking their approval, the next day would he send her to the poorhouse. So she agreed to this. Mrs. Thompson allowed her to be set on a bed in her house. Then Mr. Thompson just left for his work. He went to his shop, hoped that Mrs. Thompson would take care of Maggie and there would be no friction between them. After his work was over, the whole day's labor, he went home and he saw the light shining through the window of his house. So that was a good omen according to him. He peeped through the window and he couldn't see his wife, Mrs. Thompson's face, because her back was against the window, but he could see Maggie sitting opposite her. They were conversing. And looking at the facial expression of Maggie, he was relieved, because it seems that Maggie was happy. It seemed that the ice had broken between the two girls, the two ladies, Mrs. Thompson and Maggie. So he went inside, and he was smart. He didn't bring up the topic of Maggie. He just asked for dinner, and he started eating his dinner. His wife, on the other hand, might have been waiting for him to bring up the topic of Maggie, what to do next about her. But they were playing mind games, so he wouldn't bring the topic up. Then finally the wife, Mrs. Thompson, said, "So what's the plan? What to do about Maggie?" So he coolly replied, "Well, I thought the plan is that tomorrow we have to send her to the poorhouse, right?" So she's like, "Yeah, but I think that she has just lost her mother and separated from her siblings. She didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to her siblings, by the way." So Mrs. Thompson was also starting to get attached to Maggie. She was that kind of a kid, a lovely child. So she said that we should keep her for a couple of days, take care of her. So Mr. Thompson said, okay, fine. But in his heart, he was like, yes. And then he went to Maggie and spoke at length to her for the first time, asked her how she feels, does it pain? And she replied with such good manners and there was so much gratitude and thankfulness in her, obviously, that anybody would be attached to her. And they took care of her for a few days and a few weeks and a few months, and she was never sent to the poorhouse. She had become a member of this incomplete family, which was now complete. Mrs. Thompson's motherhood, her maternal instincts, which had been frozen for so many years, had now thawed. It had melted, and they were overflowing. And for the first time, the family was happy. It had completely changed their life. So for Maggie, Mr. Thompson might have been an angel to save her, but the truth is, this burden, this precious burden, was actually the angel in disguise for Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, because Mr. Thompson could now claim that he was the happiest person in the world.
Hi students, this is AJ sir. If you like this video, press the like button. If you would like to enroll for my online test series or online lectures, email me or message me on Instagram. Check the description for more information.